We're going to take a look at Genesis. We're going to take a break from Revelation for a couple reasons. Number one, I thought it'd be really weird to start the year talking about God's judgment on evil. That seemed a little bit negative to me. And secondly, as I sort of look back, I realized that we're reading the end of the book without really understanding the beginning. And unless we understand the beginning, then actually the end has no context. I do know people who the first thing they do when they start reading a novel is to read the last page. And they always say something like, in case I die, I want to know what happens, right? But I don't like that. And so that's in a sense what we've been doing. And so I think as we look at the beginning of the story and as we understand that Genesis really sets the stage for the rest of the Bible, then Revelation will make a lot more sense. And what I hope we'll see is that Genesis is not just introducing the problem, it's actually introducing themes that are all throughout. And the Bible makes a lot more sense if you really dig into Genesis. And there are things in there that we would think, oh no, that happened later. Or, oh no, that's only a New Testament thing. Or that only happened once Israel established a kingdom. And when you look at Genesis, it's like, no, actually those patterns, those ideas have always been there from the very beginning. And the whole Bible is really just a retelling of what's happening in Genesis and expanding on that. And we'll begin to see why Revelation is an appropriate ending to the story that is first laid out in the book of Genesis. So fair warning, though, we're going to go pretty slowly through this because I think there's a lot of work to be done to really understand what God is saying. And there's going to be details that will not get filled in till a few months later. Okay, and you'll see what I mean today. There's going to be a few things that don't quite have concrete definition, but hang in there with us for a few months and hopefully it'll become a little bit clearer. So Genesis chapter 1, starting in verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seeds, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the fourth day. And God said, let the water swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas. Let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps the earth. And it goes on. We're going to stop right there, okay? So the trouble we run into, that the church has run into, is when we read Genesis in a very literal way. Because at face value, it seems like Genesis is making statements about how there was nothing, and then God created all these things. It seems to talk about the way that the material universe came into being. So the problems we run into when trying to explain our faith is people are going to ask, where are the dinosaurs? Right? And people are going to ask, what about the Big Bang? And there's all these sort of questions that Christians for years have tried to answer within the context of Genesis, when Genesis is not answering any of those questions. And if you really look at it, Genesis in its structure is not descriptive, it's poetic. And secondly, Genesis takes its cues from a lot of the literary creation stories of the day. It's very similar to a lot of the Egyptian texts, Sumerian texts, Mesopotamian texts. All these other texts that describe the creation of the cosmos is very, very similar to Genesis. So the difficulty we run into is when we read it, it seems like there was a story, there was nothing, and then this tells us how everything came into existence because God spoke it into being. But I say, and if you actually dig into the scholarship, that's not what it's about. Because if it's not that there was nothing. If you actually look at verses 1 and 2, it says there was darkness, there was the deep, and there was waters. So it's not that there was nothing. There was actually something there. There are certainly verses in the Bible that talk about how God created the material world we see, right? If you look at Colossians chapter 1, it says, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible, so everything we see was created by him, and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Hebrews 11:3 says, by faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, okay, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. So there are certainly verses in the Bible that indicate that God did create the material universe, but that is not the main concern of Genesis. It's not how everything came into being because there was already stuff there. If you look at ancient writings about creation, they never care about how matter came. They never considered like there was no such thing as a rock, and then all of a sudden now there's a rock. They never ever considered that. In the ancient world, creation was not about creating material. Creation was always about taking a state that was disordered and chaotic and giving it order and function. Okay, so let me say that again. In the ancient world and in Genesis 1, it's not about how a rock came to be. It's always about taking a world that was chaotic and disordered and bringing order and function to it. Okay, the word for create is the Hebrew word bara. It's used 50 times in the Old Testament. And when you look at all its uses, it's always associated with God creating. Bara is always a God action, and it never, ever has anything to do with creating stuff, creating material, creating matter. Okay, so let's look at where this idea comes from. Let's look at verses 1 and 2 and 6 through 8 again. So here we go. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So what does that mean? That's just basically saying God created what's up there, heavens, and what's down here. Okay, in the Hebrew language, that acts like saying A to Z. When we say this store has everything from A to Z, we're not saying it has just A and Z. What are we saying? Everything in between. So when it says God created the heavens and the earth, it's saying God created what's up there, what's down here, and everything in between. Look at what it says. It says the world was formless, or was without form and void. Darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. This is important. We have talked about this before. In the Hebrew mind, waters and the sea represented uncontrollable chaos. And this was not unique to Israel. If you look at other texts, they see an uncreated world, and it's described often as having darkness and having water. So when it says the darkness was over the face of the deep, the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters, that's their representation of chaos, okay? Of a chaotic system with no order. And we've talked about this in Revelation. Think about this. You live at the time of writing of Genesis, okay? You don't have a scientific knowledge of the ocean. You don't know what's under the ocean. You don't understand how waves work and how it's affected by the moon's gravity. You don't understand where storms come from. All you know is that when you look at the ocean or when you sail in the ocean, it's uncontrollable. It's chaotic. And if you're on a boat and it's late at night and you're going to see something swimming under the ocean, you have no idea what it is. Sometimes it's huge. Sometimes it's small. Sometimes it's glowing. Sometimes it flies out of the ocean. So it's completely uncontrollable. So to them, the sea represented chaos. Remember in Daniel and Revelation, where did the beast come from? The sea, the ocean. It represented where evil lived, right? And think about this. In Genesis later on, how is the world restored to sort of this disordered, chaotic state? The flood, right? The flood takes what was orderly and then destroys it. So to them, the ocean, the sea, represents chaos, destruction, evil. So what does God do? He takes the waters and he separates it in verse 6. It says, God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. What does that mean, right? And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. So what's the picture? There's this water, which represents chaos, and God takes the water and it makes some of the water go below and some of the water go above. So there's water below and there's water above. Now think. If you're living at that time, that makes perfect sense, because where do you live? On land. And below land is water. And above land is water, because rain comes down, right? So to them, the earth was like this dome. And above the dome was holding back these waters, which is the rain, and sometimes the rain comes down. And then below the land is water, right? The sea, where it's cast. So God is separating. Now this is kind of interesting. We're not going to get into this. But so God created this expanse, the space that separated the waters. And what did he call that space? Heaven, capital H. Okay? Verse 1, it says heavens and earth, lowercase h. So heaven, sky, earth below. But the expanse is heavens, meaning what? All of the creation we exist in, where the waters are above and below, is actually referred to as heaven in Genesis. Okay, we're not going to get into that right now, okay? And so then God continues creating order from chaos. So not only does he tame the seas that can represent chaos, but then he separates land, he creates oceans, he creates the cycle of day and night, he installs stars to help delineate seasons, months, days, and all this. So what is God doing in Genesis? He's taking something that was formless and void, something that was uncontrollable and chaotic, and he gives it order. Okay, so here's what's actually happening in Genesis 1. It's not creating something out of nothing. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. So here's what's happening in Genesis 1. What is that? That's a pile of Legos. It's a chaotic pile of Legos. This is formless and void. Okay? This is how they understood the universe to be. It's just a pile of Legos. Does it have function? It does not. Does it have order? It does not. So what God does is he takes this disordered situation. If you ever go to the Lego store down the street, it's quite chaotic. And what do we do? What do the kids do? There's this big tub of just Legos. What do the kids do? They take the Legos and they start to create things out of the chaos. And now the things they create have function. That's what God's doing in Genesis 1. He's separating the seas from the land. He's installing stars, creating seasons, creating the sun, and creating the moon. Okay? It's not creating something out of nothing. So If we go back to verse 2, the verse 2, it said the earth was formless. The word there was tohu in the Greek. It was formless. And so what God does is he gives it form. He gives it structure. He gives us seasons. He gives us land. He gives us oceans. He gives us stars, right? So he gives it structure, and that structure gives the creation the ability to be productive. Are you with me? This is really nerdy. I understand that. Okay? So God gives us structure and the ability to be productive. Look at verse 24 to 25. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Let's leave that up there. So in the first part, it says the living creatures came out of what? The earth. And then in verse 25, it says, no, God made the living creatures. So did God make the living creatures, or are living creatures produced from the earth? Both, right? Why? Because God, in a sense, created the living creatures, but he also created a system where living creatures can keep reproducing each other. Why does it come from the earth? Well, it makes sense because to them, right, they have no idea what's under there. What comes out of the earth? Little baby moles and rats and all sorts of things. So of course, to them, it's like, oh, magic. The earth is producing snakes and all sorts of things that come out of these little burrows, right? And so it's both. God created the system and God created the animals, but he created the system where the animals can keep reproducing. So the earth was formless. God gave it structure, but it also says the earth was void. That's the Hebrew word bohu. Bohu. Turn to your neighbor and say bohu. Okay, so it was formless and it was void, bohu. So what does God do? It has structure, and so then he fills it with humans, animals, birds, plants, sea creatures, all that. Okay, so here's how to think about it. The first thing that God does is he creates the structure. That's like building a house. So he creates this house. And the house now has the potential not to just be a house, but to be a home. How does something become a home? You install people in it. Okay? So separating the seas, creating day and night, all that is creating the house, but now God populates it with those who actually can use the space, and here's what's important, have function within the space. Okay? So it's going from house to home, right? Everything now has a function in the space, right? Animals reproduce, plants give seeds, and then humans also reproduce. Now, here is what's interesting, right? But the last act of filling the house to make it a home is different than all the other descriptions of filling the house to make it a home. Verse 26, then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. That's different. Everything else was just here. Go do your thing. Plants. Produce your seeds to produce more plants. Animals and sea creatures fill the land. Right? Animals and sea creatures reproduce, multiply. This is the only situation where the thing that God creates has a function relative to God and relative to creation. Humans are the only ones in this whole story of bringing order where we have a role that is relative to God as being made in his image and being relative to creation as having dominion over creation. So we are the only part that is meant to exercise authority over all that is created as representatives of God. That's revolutionary, because back then, humans were created by gods to do what? Serve the gods' needs. The gods needed something done. They didn't want to do it themselves. They create humans, and humans are supposed to meet the gods' needs. In our story, God has no needs. He wants to relate to us in a totally different way. In most of the ancient Near East creation stories, humans are the workers that produce the goods that the boss needs. They're the workers. They're the factory workers. The boss needs this, the humans make it. In God's economy, we're not the ones creating the stuff. We're the ones representing the company. That's different, right? So we'll use Kevin. I always end up using Kevin in some way, right? So Kevin has a business. There are people in factories who produce the stuff the company needs. But when Kevin goes into a meeting, he's not a worker for the company. He's a representative of the company. He carries with him the authority of the company. So as images of God, we are the ones who don't just do the work because God needs this or needs that. We're the ones that carry the authority of God into a situation. Okay, there's something unique about human beings. And I think we lose that when we give into the narrative, or when the world hears this narrative that all you and I are just super evolved primates. And I understand where that comes from, because when you look at the pride with which humanity has abused creation, it is a lot more humbling to just think of ourselves as having been a series of accidental progressions that allowed us to just be above the animals. That it just, we luckily built tools, we luckily had language, we luckily created society, and so we're no better than the animals. We just were lucky. I understand where that comes from. But biblically, the truth is there is something different about us. And the reason why we have abused creation is because we don't understand what it means to have dominion and what it means to be a representative of God in creation. Okay, so let's re-summarize, and then let's bring this home. So Genesis 1 is not about how God created the material universe. It's about why God created the universe and how he gave the universe a function. So what it looked like is the creation that was chaotic now brings forth life and perpetuates a cycle of life filled with plants that reproduce, animals who reproduce, and humans who, yes, reproduce, but are also the images of God in creation and have dominion over all he created. So what is Genesis 1 telling us? It is not telling us how everything got here. What Genesis is telling us is that when God created, he gave creation a function, or I'll say this, he gave creation, us included, a purpose. Okay, so 1 point today, God created the cosmos, the universe, with a purpose in mind, a function in mind, and he gave us a purpose in it. And we will unravel what that looks like. So what is our purpose in it? What does it mean to be the image of God? What does it mean to have dominion, right? I just want us to remember that we have a purpose. Creation story in Genesis was about creating purpose, not stuff. And you and I being created have a purpose. So all that you see here is not an accident. You are not an accident. We did not just happen to have atoms collide in a fortuitous way to result in what we have now. It's not chance. It's not accident. It is purposeful. We are purposely made, and there is a purpose for our existence. Why was the book Purpose-Driven Life so popular even among non-Christians? And I would go to that church, actually, Saddleback Church was like 20, 30,000 people at that time when the book was really popular. Why was Purpose-Driven Life such a popular book even with non-Christians? Is because there is this longing inside us to be reminded that there is more to life than just existence. There is more to life than just experiencing things. There is a purpose to our life. There is a calling. There is a reason why God put everything here and why God put us here. There is a deep longing to be reminded that I have a purpose. Even Google knows this. So I looked up in Google, so it must be true, the benefits of having purpose. And Google told me, so it must be true, that people who have a sense of purpose actually have a lower risk of premature death. You live longer if you understand you have a purpose. They have less likely of a chance of experiencing dementia, disabilities, strokes, and heart attacks. And you have better sleep and stronger immune system if you have a purpose. That's crazy. People who have purpose have lower stress levels. Are you stressed? Maybe you've forgotten you have a purpose, or you've forgotten what your purpose is. People who have a purpose feel more positive emotions like contentment, relaxation, enthusiasm, and joy, and are less likely to feel angry, anxious, sluggish, or sad. We all crave purpose. Purpose is built into us, and it's good for us. I'm an introvert. I love to stay at home. But if I stay at home, my wife can tell you, I go crazy. And sometimes I just stand in the living room, not knowing what to do. And she's like, what are you thinking about? And I say, I don't know. Sometimes I just have to leave, right? I love staying at home, but if the day of staying at home lacks purpose, I go nuts. I feel I have to be productive. But here's what's weird. If the purpose of the day is to stay at home, to chill and relax, it's perfectly fine. I don't go crazy. I watch Netflix. I don't feel guilty or unproductive. I read books. I don't feel guilty or unproductive because if I wake up in the day and there's no purpose, I go crazy. But if the purpose is to relax, then that's fine. I have no problem with that. Even if my purpose during the week is just to survive to what I call PMTF. PMTF stands for Pearl Milk Tea Friday. And at work, on Fridays, when everyone seems stressed, I designate a special day and I send out an email and I say, order Pearl Milk Tea, we're going to have it on Friday. And you know what? Everyone perks up because we have something to look forward to. We have a purpose. Our purpose is just to survive until we get our Pearl Milk Tea on Friday. And even as ridiculous as that sounds, having that silly little purpose actually does so much for morale and does so much to keep us going. Isn't that ridiculous, right? So again, God created the cosmos with a purpose in mind and gave us a purpose in his creation. That's what Genesis 1 is talking about. Order from chaos. Purpose from purposelessness. So two things. I think we need to be reminded that our purpose is bigger than what we often settle for at the moment. Think about that. Our purpose is often bigger than what we settle for at the moment. Right? That Pearl Milk Tea Friday thing, what's my purpose? My purpose at that moment is just to survive. Our purpose is bigger than just surviving. Our purpose is bigger than just earning enough to be able to experience all these amazing things. Sometimes that's my purpose. My purpose is earning enough just so I can experience this or that, just so I can have this, just so I can go there. Our purpose is so much bigger than that. Let me even say this. The temptation as a teacher is to feel like I'm fulfilling some purpose because what am I doing as a teacher? I'm molding the future minds or the minds of the future generation. I'm molding their intellect. I'm molding their view of morality. I'm influencing in a positive way and paying forward and investing in the future. So as a teacher, I feel like I'm living out a purpose. And it's a good purpose and it's a worthy purpose. And it's a great accomplishment. But I have to be reminded that that's only an echo of the bigger purpose God has called me into, to be his image and to have dominion. It's great that I get to do what I do, but that is not my purpose. Or sometimes I think I'm fulfilling my purpose by serving at church, whether that's up here or speaking or whatever, right? I'm fulfilling some purpose, but I have to be reminded it's so much bigger than that. That what it means to be an image of God, what it means to have dominion over creation is so much bigger than me serving God in this church on Sunday, than me teaching kids during the week, and all of that's much bigger. And so, church, today, I just want us to consider, is your concept of your purpose too small? Or is it even non-existent? Do you even not know? Okay, something to consider. So, our purpose is bigger than what we often settle for at the moment. Secondly, I think it's easy for that purpose to be images of God to slowly morph into something else entirely. it's easy for our purpose to shift. And the reason that this happens, I think, is because tasks and responsibilities that begin to consume all of our time, attention, and energy, all of a sudden that becomes our purpose. And for me, because there are seasons where my job consumes all of my energy, all of my time, all of my attention, I live as if my purpose is my job. And my purpose is to teach children. And my purpose is to fulfill all these targets I'm given from above. Because so much is invested into that, I live as if that has become my purpose. Or I live as if my purpose is parenting my kids well. Or my purpose is providing for my family. Or my purpose is to be a husband. No. Those are expressions of it, but my purpose is to be an image of God, which we'll define in about 4 weeks, and to have dominion over creation, which we'll define in about 7 weeks. Okay? It's much bigger, and it drifts. If my job allows me to do that, then great. If the money I earn allows me to do, if the resources I have allows me to be an image of God, that's great, but that's not my purpose. My purpose is not an earner. My purpose is not a provider. My purpose is not a parent. My purpose is not an employee. That's not my purpose. My purpose is not to enjoy the world. It's deeper than that. So church, I've been really vague about what it means that our unique purpose is to be an image of God, and I've been very vague about what it means to have dominion over creation. But today, I just want us to pause as we launch into this new year, sometimes blindly, sometimes without any time to reflect, sometimes just having to deal with the next crisis. I want us to pause and remind ourselves that in the big picture, the story of God begins with the fact that God created the cosmos with a purpose in mind, and he gave us a purpose in this creation. The beginning of everything points to that truth, that God created the cosmos with a purpose in mind and gave us a purpose in his creation. And what we're going to see is the story expands on what that looks like. And we're going to understand where that went wrong, why that went wrong, why that became a problem. We're going to understand why Jesus had to be a human and why Jesus lived that purpose fully as a human. And we're going to understand why Revelation ends the way it does and uses the phrasing and imagery the way it does. If we remember that creation was not about creating stuff, it was creating purpose. It was purposely creating with purpose in mind. And that's important to remember because sometimes we need to step back and check. And if there are things that I have internalized, philosophies and value systems I've internalized that actually detract from my purpose, then I need to reorient. If there are things I'm investing into that actually detract from my main purpose, I need to reorient. So the question I just want us to sort of wrestle with is, to what extent do we just exist, and to what extent do we actually exist with purpose? To what extent are we going day to day and just existing and just trying to complete the next thing, get over the next hump, deal with the next crisis? To what extent are we existing, and to what extent are we actually existing with a purpose in mind? Because on Tuesday, I go back to work. And on Tuesday, I'm going to need to remind myself, I'm not going to work to teach kids. Actually, I'm not, because there's no kids there. I'm going to work to sit through boring meetings all day. But, okay, I'm not just going to work to sit through boring meetings on Tuesday. I get to go to work to be an image of God. Chris, are you okay? I think it's a sign from God that either A, you're about to be really poor, or B, you need to give more so he will bless you more, right? It's a sign. Or you need to get your pants sewed, okay? I don't know, okay? So again, right? So let's come back, right? So to what extent do we just exist, and to what extent do we exist with purpose? Because again, When you walk out these doors, you're going to have a purpose and a goal. But just, we need to remember that the purpose and goal of all of humanity is actually to be an image of God and to have dominion. It's much bigger than what we do. Okay, let me just say it one more time. Can we put it one more time? Because this sets the stage. The name of the series is Setting the Stage, right? Genesis. God created the cosmos with a purpose in mind and gave us, you, right? Chris Lowe, Michael Owen, gave you a purpose in his creation. Okay? So can we just close our eyes in reflection and just give us a moment? How would you answer that question? Are you just existing? Or are you existing with purpose? And if you are existing with purpose, is that purpose too small? Or is that purpose drifting away from something else that you know, like, no, that's not God's main purpose? Again, we haven't fully defined it, but you can tell, like, no, this is not God's main purpose for me. This is not my main identity. Just take a moment, wrestle with those questions before God.